So, welcome everybody to the Substack, Hugh Smiley Substack, and we're here today with a very special guest, Maury Miloff from Chelsea, Quebec, Canada, and Maury is has worked for the Canadian government in the past for many, many years internationally, and has experience in many fields, and is generally a brilliant mind and a very open, giving heart. And we're just going to have a freewheeling, short conversation today. And you're welcome here as subscribers to the Substack channel. And of course, I do have to say this. If you feel you'd like to support my work and become a paid subscriber, there is a little button down below that you can click on, and it would be much appreciated. So here we are. Maury, welcome.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Thank you for the kind comments.
Uh, well, you deserve much more. You have quite the resume, and you are involved in so many different activities and communication with so many different groups and individuals. So we have a short time. I'm going to try to keep this to 15 or 20 minutes. Inshallah, ojalá, as we say in Spain. And so I'm just wondering, because you sort of have your finger on the pulse, of the planet, the mankind, what's a happening, what's a going on. So lay it on us. What is your take on what's going on in the world right now? I mean, it's always complex. It probably always has been, but it's becoming more complex, more multi-layered. More aspects of what's happening seem to be hidden, difficult to discern. The news, can we trust it? So would you be willing just to talk a little bit about, first of all, how you're experiencing some of the really deep challenges that almost everybody is faced with these days, and and then share a little bit about how you see what's happening in the big picture, maybe
Mhm.
geopolitics or just socially, and then if you have any special coping mechanisms that help you to maintain your balance and your equanimity. I think it would be really interesting. A lot of people are talking about this, and I think we can all feed into each other and help one another along to be able to paddle across this river with success.
Well, I'm no expert in the ability to answer your question, really. But let me start with my own personal experience. I'm actually quite insulated from the challenges, so many, maybe billions of people experience in terms of deprivation, war, loneliness, poor health, etc. I live in a beautiful semi-rural place outside of Ottawa. I'm financially fine. I've got a very close family. I'm married with three kids with whom I'm in close communication with. I'm a grandfather, very, in love with my first grandchild.
Mm.
Um, but I'm acutely aware of the suffering, and always have been since I was a child, really. So I do try to follow the news. Right now, I'm actually trying to fast a little bit from the news for various reasons because perhaps staying so plugged in is a type of a way of trying to cope with anxiety, which is a bit fruitless. What will happen. But we have some impact certainly on how things unfold. But there is a big picture, as you note, going on. It's the evolution of humanity, the evolution of the planet.
Yeah.
And we can see from what we know historically, um, things are much more complex now, much more dangerous, the level of risk much higher. But at the same time, tremendous opportunities because of technology, because of relative enlightenment of significant portions of the population, the ability to learn, etc. So, yes, it's a dangerous time. We can see the recrudescence of nationalism, very dangerous in the point of view of the Baha'i faith, which I'm a member of.
Mm.
They refer to three false gods: racism, nationalism, and communism. These are all, ideologies which people are willing to do very dangerous things to propagate, dangerous things in terms of hurting others and themselves. So I believe nationalism, a sane level of patriotism is good, but the interdependence of humanity needs to be recognized. And I think whatever action is taken to deepen nationalism, to will prove excessive and counterproductive and will be recognized as such. So I believe in the medium term, especially the long term, we will see the unfoldment of a world civilization, a global civilization, harmonious civilization. And a lot of what we take as inevitable in terms of aggression and injustice, I believe will diminish so greatly that we will not be able to recognize the coming world for
Well,
its
it's
for all.
interesting because nationalism, at one time, nationalism was an evolutionary step for mankind, whereas before that, the formation of nations, like Italy and France, we learned it in high school, right? There were just tribes with different languages and all fighting with each other, principalities, and then at a certain time, all these different subgroups and ethnic groups came together under one overarching government with the one overarching government. So it was a really a big advance. But now it's become something that's regressive. Is that the word or retrogressive? Yeah, regressive. It actually gets in the way of us going towards a greater form of unity, which
Right.
is world unity, right?
I would totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very interesting. And communism was in there. Well, but also within communism too. I mean, the ideal, the principles, it sounds very noble and enlightened. But I guess
Yeah.
it was in the practice of it, it wasn't able to be practiced without a lot of aggression and violence and suppression. So,
Right.
yeah. So, what would you name as the major traumas or challenges of this day? Because there seem to be a few of them cascading
Right.
into
Right.
a maelstrom, right?
Right.
How would you list them?
Yeah, I would say materialism, and the flip side of that might be lack of spiritual knowledge. Um, and from there springs a lot of problems, deep partisanship, um, and exhaustion from consumption, diversion, superficial entertainment.
Yeah. So
Um,
historically speaking, I don't know how much of a historian you are, but would you say that the materialism today is any greater or deeper than it was 100 years ago or 500 years?
I would say definitely yes. I mean, I'm sure all of us forever have striven for material security and improvement in material in their material well-being, and that's great. That's part of the natural drive. It's understandable,
Sure.
but it comes at the expense of serenity, communion with nature. I remember lived in Africa and Asia for about 16 years. One of my favorite memories is being in African villages. You have your supper, the fire dies away, and you look up at the sky, and every inch is covered with a glittering star. It's like the most extraordinary entertainment. Nothing can beat it. I don't know how I ever left it actually, but so we've lost that. And I was reading also that in a hunter-gatherer tribe, a child is picked up, a young child is picked up by other 24 or 26 different people. So we had some kind of atomization due to our industrial age, and I'm sure there's other forces at work, but there have been losses. I think we can have some kind of better balance between, but maybe this material wealth which we're accumulating excessively in some parts of the world will lead to us having the freedom to not work the way we're working and to
Yeah.
more. of the arts. I know in the Soviet Union, which was never that wealthy, wow, the children were all so educated in
Yeah,
artistic pursuits, right? It's
that's
very,
right. Yeah, that's true. And in Cuba, which is another communist country, the poor, but wonderful training, scientific training. Um,
mhm.
yeah. So the materialism and what else?
And a loss of faith, spiritual faith, and a lack of religious knowledge. I think the needs of the time are there's a lot of spiritual knowledge out there. What is being practiced, I think, by large numbers of people involves some lack of initiative in themselves studying their own spiritual writings, maybe due to direction from a priest, or maybe lack of deep interest in it. The information's out there, but there's, I think, a lack of depth. If you look at statistics, you see that people don't read Holy Scriptures anymore, but they
No.
might read some self-help,
Yeah.
which could be good, psychological information, and etc. It's all wonderful. But I think there's a level of truth which only comes through sages, in my personal opinion, through your founders of religions. There's a whole level of
Well, what about the idea, excuse me for jumping in, but that's what I do. And that now at this time there's kind of an awakening happening amongst a certain percentage of the world's population, and it seems to be growing, of the people finding within themselves a divinity,
yes,
a creative force, or a sage, an inner sage, to use your term, which actually, or some people might even call it the soul, becoming aware of the soul, which is this amazing solar angel, which we don't even understand, but seems to be able to provide inspiration and guidance and protection, maybe. Um, and that maybe this is what's taking the place of the decline of religions around the world.
yes.
And that this is a good thing, even though people are sort of bumbling along and not quite sure how to do it or where to go, but putting together, connecting the dots, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I mean, a little bit of old time religion and some new age meditation and mindfulness and so on and so on.
Yes, I think it's great. It's great to get in touch with the inner self,
The
our
higher
dream
self, I'm referring
higher
to, not
self.
the ego, so the little s self, but the big
Right,
S self. Yeah.
right. And there's a lot of people having a lot of experiences of inner oneness and
Uh-huh.
trying to tune in. I think that's all. I mean, there's many parts of conventional religion which are a drag on the spirit, which encase people in narrow forms. So there is a need for liberation from that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
It's definitely a time of departures and new beginnings, potentially at least.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned being a member of the Baha'i faith, and I believe you're also Jewish background, right?
Correct. Yes.
So, what would you, in regard to your suggestion before that people go back to their religion and talk with a priest or a rabbi and read the sacred writings and um, find again at a new level their own religious or spiritual roots, what would you suggest to a Jew today, living today, or a Baha'i, and thirdly, a Jewish Baha'i?
I'm not sure that I'm saying that people should go back to their religions, but
Mhm.
I just think that the search for spiritual truth, it's hard to find too many people who are doing that very deeply. And what I would recommend is that people search through all the world scriptures or wherever they can find what feels to be very deep truth. And when they do, I think they'll discover that truth is one. And I love this analogy of the a lamp. that in a way a lamp or as like a let's say a religion, and but there's a light shining through the lamp. We should try to find the light
Hmm.
and not be too obsessed with um, the container.
The actual form of the lamp, or which
Yeah.
style of lamp, or where it is.
Right. So I think there's a need to actually be open to religions outside of our own,
Right.
so that we can grasp the real essential oneness of spiritual truth and all truth. Truth is one, whether it's scientific or religious, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
In other words, it's the essence of religion, which I think is important. The forms may have all been important for their time. Maybe the caste system in Hinduism or being kosher in Judaism was critical for a particular age for health reasons, for stability, whatever. But what are the teachings needed today? What are the rules, the policies, etc., the programs which will be conducive to world
Right.
unity? Yeah.
Well, it seems like there's a different types of teachings in those religions, and some are social teachings, which may be relevant to the age when they were taught or revealed, and others are more universal truths, that we find everywhere, even in non-religious spiritual paths. Um, so, these days, especially in the West, but growing all around the world, this secularism, you start talking about religion, people just roll their eyes, and there's so many aspects of the exoteric or the non-essential aspect of the religions, organized religions of the past that really have left a bad taste with so
Oh,
many billions of people, probably in the billions now.
oh yeah. 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 I do. I'm very interested in statistics and religion.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so there's a huge move. They call it the nuns, means the non-affiliate,
Oh, right.
unaffiliated.
Yeah.
That number is increasing tremendously,
Right.
and partly it may be a very positive thing in the sense of people being dissatisfied with something if they go and then search more and don't get caught up in, let's say, materialism, ideologies, politics, I would say, is isms, materialism, consumerism, pessimism, depression, whatever.
Yes.
Uh, so it's one thing to free oneself from the fetters, from the inadequacies of our traditional religions, but I would hope that people still search for a vehicle which can bring humanity together and which can elevate our own our being. And there are so many ways of doing that.
So just a little question, somewhat related. There is this growing polarization in our society. Um, many countries. We see it in the United States, perhaps more than anywhere. Good old USA is always the outstanding example. Exceptionalism in every way, right? Good, bad, and the ugly. Um, so it's got to the point where a lot of people can't even bear to talk with a person from the other side, whatever that other side might be, politically, religiously. So I'm very interested in authentic dialogue. It's been a real thing for several years now. And we used to have a group that meet regularly on Zoom before the COVID, um, and talk about, the protocols. What is authentic dialogue? Real
Mm,
conversation, the consultation, or and how do you practice it, and what does it feel like, and how can we find a way to how can a liberal talk with a conservative, or a Democrat with a Republican, or a Palestinian with a Jew, or and so on, Do you have any ideas how to transcend that growing divide that people seem to be experiencing?
I'm very interested in learning how to do that. And I just want to mention that actually the in the Baha'i movement right now, there's a program called Ruhi Institute, which teaches different subjects. And one of them right now is called something like Principles of Public Discourse. And I'm just
Yeah.
about to start my second unit of that,
Oh, yeah.
and how to learn how to dialogue in a way which doesn't lead to deeper division.
Uh,
There's an art to doing it.
that's not, yeah, exactly. It's a science and an art,
Right.
and you
Right.
have to learn it and want it too, of course. Well, that
Yes.
sounds really good. Maybe we'll have you back again in the future, and you could, after you've taken a few classes or whatever, and you could extrapolate a little bit about that.
There's 3 units. I'll come back after the third, or maybe our
Okay.
my teacher will come back.
Yeah, it sounds really good. And can anybody take those courses, or do you have to be
Yeah.
Baha'i?
No, absolutely open and free.
Okay. What's it
Even
called again?
Ruhi in RUHI. It's probably online. Ruhi
Yeah.
Institute.
Yes, but yes, and that particular course is called
It's on public discourse.
public discourse. Okay, yeah.
Public discourse. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was into Habermas several years ago.
Oh, yeah,
That
too.
idea of the public forum, and which we have still. And what I've noticed, like on Substack, more and more people are coming forth and speaking their truth and listening and exchanging ideas is pretty exciting. There's a quickening afoot.
Oh, our access to knowledge is immense. Even I was on X and I
Yeah.
was, following the Ukraine-Russia war, the Syria war, and the Palestine-Israel, Gaza-Israel, Palestine-Israel war. And
Okay.
so I'm very anxious about, I want to get updates all the time. And
Sure.
now every analyst from universities, from think tanks, they're all on there posting all the time. It's in little blips, but I feel very privileged to have that kind of free access. It's incredible. Um, but it's also time consuming and they're very, well, it stimulates one to go deeper, maybe into more substantial literature, but it's important that we understand all the sides of a conflict.
Yes.
I'm very saddened to hear people mouth slogans on one side or the other, lack empathy and understanding. It's not going to bring what we really want as a
Oh,
result of our understanding, which is peace,
no.
unity, justice. We have to learn how to speak to each other. I agree so much with you.
There's that old expression, comes from the native First Nations people. You can never judge another man or woman until you walk a mile in their moccasins.
Right,
And
right.
it's so
So
true, really.
true.
But it's hard, it really takes a dedication. And as you say, there's a limited amount of time and attention and energy and so on. And money is part of it. Those finite things, right?
Yeah,
Um, to be able to feel the way somebody else is feeling or think the way they're thinking or perceive the way they're perceiving, it takes a little dedication, but it's
yeah.
worth every minute of every ounce of effort.
It is. And what I feel we lack, as I've looked for it, for example, in the Israel-Palestine conflict right now, which is
Yeah.
such a immense tragedy,
Yeah.
um, it's very hard to find debates. You can
Hmm.
get one side and you listen to them, and it sounds great. Making a lot of good points,
Hmm.
but they're not dealing with the main concerns of the other side.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
left out, or it's
Yeah.
presented in a distorted way.
Hmm.
And when you have the few debates I've seen online, it ends up with people shouting at each other. It doesn't have to be like that. I don't think it does.
So you are, as a Baha'i, I understand, there's kind of a global view that we're all one. Um, and you're also Jewish, not Israeli, but
Yes,
born in Canada, right?
correct.
So as an individual, we all have our personal identities, right?
Yes,
Male, our sexuality, nationality, and ethnic group, et cetera, education. So there's several big ones. Climate change is another. AI, the threat of AI, possibly. Uh, excuse me. How do you feel as an individual human being who happens to be Jewish, regarding what's going on in the Middle East right now, but also with your perspective as a Baha'i? Could you
yeah,
just, we're starting to reach the end of our time, but that might be a
yeah,
really interesting
yes,
subject to touch upon.
yeah. I feel this is a big claim, okay, and I maybe, but it's not. That's not like a humble claim, but I feel I'm one of the few people I know who are fair-minded on this subject because I've really tried to understand all sides
Yeah.
and I embrace all sides. I'm empathetic to the suffering of all sides.
Mm.
it grieves me what's going on that my people have caused such immense suffering in Gaza. I mean, the whole place is destroyed. Um, but at the same time, I believe the response they made is not coming from nowhere, and they have their own crisis they're having to deal with.
The response who made?
The response Israel
Oh,
made, I mean, the war they've launched does not come from nowhere. They feel very threatened. There's a whole history of the
yeah,
reasons why they're insecure.
sure.
And there's reasons why the war went on so long, which are not to do with them, but to do with Hamas. So it's a complex situation. It's so tragic. Out of World War II and what happened to the Jews, Israel was born. I mean, Israel was in the process of being born anyways, but it galvanized a massive international support and, doubled the population nearly overnight of what was then Palestine. And it's possible the suffering of the Palestinians will lead to something for them as well. I certainly hope so.
I was just came across this morning. You know how one comes across 100 different things in an hour if you go online or just start thinking or looking at one's library of 1,800 unread books,
Yeah.
guilty as charged. But there's a group of people who are studying and creating an updated um, constitution. Is that the word? Of the United Nations.
Yes, I've seen that.
You have, okay. In that, the United Nations came at the end of pretty much World War II, and the League of Nations, which had been created after World War One, was failing dismally. And so the powers that be, that were, came together, and now the United Nations, in its turn, is not able to. It's not up to snuff to meet the challenges and the reality of the international community of nations, etc. So that sounds really interesting. So maybe there will be a new kind of world body, a reformed United Nations, or something that's more adequate to the day we're living in, and that in turn will be able to uh, legislate or make decisions to resolve such conflicts as in the Ukraine, and Israel and Gaza, Palestine. Wouldn't that be exciting?
We're all hoping for that. I believe that will evolve like that because we need to mitigate terrible risks. We're all so interdependent now
Mm,
that the consequences of war and then the different people
mm.
countries getting involved in it, and the subterfuge, and we need to find ways to resolve it. And I think there is a role for the international community to play a much stronger role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like that risk that you're talking about, coming back full circle to one of the first questions, which was about whether your response was about materialism being one of the big bugaboos of the age. So even if we hadn't become more materialistic over the last few centuries, it would still be that much more important to look at these issues and communicate and dialogue and find new ways to avoid a disaster, nuclear war, for example, the end of the world. Um, but we have become more materialistic, as you said, and so that increases it by 10 times, perhaps, the necessity to wake up and take things seriously. And because we're at the brink, pretty close, and it would be a shame to lose these millions of years, perhaps, of evolution, in one snap, a bad decision.
Yeah, when I was growing up, and probably you too, Hugh, in the 50s,
Uh,
my mother used to say, Maury, eat all the food on your plate. People are starving in China. China
Exactly.
was
It was
like
China back then, wasn't it?
it
Yeah.
was like China was so far away. It wasn't even like part of our world. And even Mexico, we knew nothing about Islam, right? Until 911, it kind of imposed itself, or maybe it was, yeah, I guess before that a little bit. But all the everything is emerging into our consciousness, and
Mhm.
it's the whole world is becoming entangled and collectively embroiled, whether
Mhm.
it's the environment or
Yeah.
energy, uh,
Okay, so I have one last
economic
question.
development. Sure.
So all these things are coming at us, right? And then there's information overload, AI. Oh my God. Um, all these major crises, so much information at our fingertips, and we're wringing our hands, chicken little, the sky is falling. Oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So, what do you do to focus yourself and to clear your mind, your heart, so that you can have a little equanimity, as the Buddhists say, in this uh, dangerous time that we're living in?
It's a great question to end on. What every individual can do and what they are doing. It's interesting to take an inventory. I pray, I meditate, I try to be in unity with my family, which means tempering my own behavior, getting feedback and not being overreactive, being supportive, being in touch with friends, service to the community. I'm involved with a number of activities in my local community, including Truth and Reconciliation. But I also have fun. I'm so into, I'm learning guitar. It's 5 years. I think it's 5 years today. Hold on. When did the COVID lockdown start? Was it February 10th?
1920, February 19, 2020.
So it's 5 years in a month. So it's giving me huge joy. I can't tell you. And then I do dance. I do ecstatic dance with it
Ah,
locally
oh,
here.
great. Ah,
I'm in a men's book club. I started a men's book club, which has been meeting regularly for about 6 years and create a
yeah,
lot of intimacy among men, which I didn't have enough real men
yes.
friends. I had them, but we weren't meeting. So, um, yeah, I try to have fun as well. And charitable giving charitably, I think is important. There's so many great causes out
Yeah.
there.
Oh, so you have a long list
Long, let's keep track.
of resources.
Yeah, health, one's health,
Yeah,
maintaining
yeah,
one's health,
yeah,
for
yeah.
resilience. And then friendship.
Yes, yeah.
Friendship is huge. My mother, when she was dying of palliative care, she lasted longer than anybody else in palliative care ever in the history of the Montreal General Hospital.
Wow.
Um, and she said she'd always say, "Maury, I'm so glad for friends." Yeah.
Well, I hope that the nature of your communication today, our communication, I should say, and will send a little note of friendship out into the world and some of the ideas that we've grazed upon in a very short period of time. Thank you so much. And thank you to the Substackers. And this will also be migrated to the YouTube podcast. So maybe you'll come back again sometime, Maury, and talk about that Ruhi course or some other subject of which you are expert in many.
Thanks. You're very encouraging. Appreciate this opportunity. I was a little nervous
Yeah,
about how
you
it would
were,
go,
but
but it was great. It was a great dialogue. You made it easy, and I really enjoyed having to field these questions and hearing what I think.
yeah, yeah. Well, you did great. You're very eloquent, and your nervousness was not well founded. But they say that a little nervousness, for the performance always makes it scintillate a little more clearly. So
Right, right,
it
right.
paid off. All
Thanks so
right.
much. Take
Thanks
care.
again, Maury. Bye bye.